Welcome back to the Laura Coates Show. Here's your host, Laura Coates.
Hey, welcome back to the Laura Coates Show right here on Sirius XM POTUS. Joining us now is Patrick Hedger, a NetChoice Director of Policy. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about DeepSeek, because we saw stock market, we saw Silicon Valley, we saw and heard from the President of the United States talking about the new Chinese company who's able to create a chatbot-esque model at a fraction of the cost and beyond. Some are calling it a Sputnik moment. Tell the audience what exactly DeepSeek has accomplished here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree with that assessment that it's a bit of a Sputnik moment. What we've seen here is that a Chinese company is claiming that they have been able to create a model that even outperforms some of the models that major U.S. tech companies have produced in processing AI queries and requests and things like that. And they're able to do it with inferior chips and at a lower cost to ultimately train the software. So it's certainly very concerning, and I think it ought to be a wake-up call to U.S. policymakers on both sides of the aisle that we need to be embracing innovators in this country and driving innovation instead of immediately rushing to try and preemptively regulate because we don't want to lose this race to the Chinese. You don't want the future of AI being controlled by China.
So what exactly have they accomplished here in terms of why has it been the fraction of the cost of, say, Chat GPT? Because we know recently there's been requests for and investments by Meta to the tune of millions, if not billions of dollars. How has this been able to get done?
Yeah, so there's a good chance that what's happened in China, they're riding off the backs, if you will, of the investment that's been made here in the United States. So there was a lot of walking that was done by American companies before this Chinese company could run. And I would be a little bit skeptical of the exact backstory behind DeepSeek. What we know about China is that they tend to exaggerate things like this, especially when they feel that they're in competition with the United States. There's a lot of evidence that the Chinese have exaggerated their GDP numbers over the years, for example. So I would take a large grain of salt with this. But then again, the model itself is open sourced, which means we're able to independently verify that regardless of how they built it, it is pretty impressive. So even if they are fudging the numbers a little bit by how impressive it is in terms of how they put it together, they're still getting very close, and they're much closer to where American companies are than we would have ever expected.
Are there concerns now in terms of regulation on the area of AI? That has been a constant conversation around the fear around AI and also the fanfare around AI. What is your thought on the ways in which it ought to be regulated, if at all?
Yeah, so I think right now we're tracking something on the order of 450 AI bills across the country in various states. And I don't know if your audience are math buffs or not, but that's a lot more. It's a lot more bills than we have states. And that is creating a lot of regulatory uncertainty. What we need is some sort of national standard, a baseline at the federal level. That way companies know what they are complying with. Because if you think about an AI chatbot or any AI system, it's fundamentally an interstate service, right? If I'm making a query to ChatGPT or Gemini, that request is going to go through servers in different states. This all runs on the back of the internet. So it's an interstate service. We should have one broad set of federal standards to regulate particular harms that we know AI could cause, but stop trying to regulate the specific technology itself. We've seen the Europeans take that approach. They rush to get AI out the window, AI regulation out the window, and there's no real AI investment or startup sector in Europe to speak of. And we don't want to put ourselves in that position.
There's a new Stargate announcement, and there's been a series of executive actions that have been taken even by this new administration. Could you describe, are there particular aspects of Trump's Stargate project that we should know about?
Yeah, the really exciting thing about the Stargate announcement is that it doesn't involve any public tax dollars. It was great to see that the Trump administration was embracing this investment. There have been concerns that the Trump administration would be pretty hostile to tech, but to see him take within the first 24 hours of his presidency to take time to do that announcement was a really good indicator that this administration understands the importance of great power competition with China, particularly on cutting-edge technologies like AI. So it was great to see that announcement. Again, this is talking about all private dollars, private investment. But the Trump administration has also put forward a couple of executive actions to try and roll back some of the more aggressive regulatory reactions to AI from the Biden administration. But has also embraced a policy from the Biden administration to open up federal lands for the data centers, the huge server buildings that actually power these systems, trying to get more electricity and more land use dedicated to those systems.
How much would that cost the American taxpayer? I know there's been a discussion of this being a substantial private sector investment. Is it confined to that?
So if we're talking about building a data center on federal lands, usually that could be a boon to the taxpayer because you would have to sign a lease agreement. So if anything, you could be returning money to federal coffers by opening up federal lands. It's like oil and gas or wind and solar leasing. So a similar dynamic to that, you could actually generate returns for taxpayers. So there's not a huge taxpayer concern here. The concern Americans should have is, are we getting too far out ahead? Are we pushing too many different types of regulations at the state and local level? I mean, even New York City has been pushing forward with their own type of AI regulation. And that's going to create such a regulatory web that it's going to be really hard for companies, particularly smaller companies. I mean, forget big tech with the lawyers and the lobbyists that they have. We're talking about the smaller tech startups using AI in innovative ways that would never be able to kind of get through a regulatory web that has, lots of different bills that are often conflicting with one another.
Well, there's a lot to unpack and to think about what's going to happen next as we are in the infancy of the second administration. But I am curious about the safe innovation framework we're hearing about from Senator Chuck Schumer. It's requiring innovators to get government permission to develop new AI innovations. Is this a good thing?
Generally not. If you look at how innovation has traditionally happened in the United States versus other countries where you have sort of a top-down, you must get permission first system, the United States has always been a leader in innovation because we've embraced what's known as permissionless innovation. You generally let innovators go out, create a technology, and deploy it, and then you go back and address specific problems where they occur, instead of trying to predict all of the problems that may result from a technology. I mean, right now, if you're thinking about AI, we're at the Model T phase of AI. And there was no way when the Model T came out, you could predict all of the different problems that would be associated with an automobile, right? We incrementally regulated as new problems arose or new solutions arose. So trying to predict all of that right now in the infancy of the technology is a mistake. That's what the Europeans have done. And again, there are no major tech companies to speak of coming out of Europe.
Thank you so much for your insight today. We will see how all this continues to unfold. Patrick Hedger, NetChoice Director of Policy. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back after a quick break right here on Sirius XM POTUS. Our next guest calls Trump a subscriber in chief. What's he mean? Stay tuned.
This is POTUS.